Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for the week starting Sunday, June 12th. Looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, we see not a whole lot going on at the moment, but that ignores the fact that we've had almost a week of storms in the area south of New Zealand, and yet another week looks to be shaping up. The short of it is, a lot of waves coming, maybe not huge, but certainly a lot of southern hemi swell. Let's get into the details. Let's do a quick recap of what's happened in the past week. It started out last Thursday with a small gale pushing southwest of New Zealand, generating 28-foot seas aimed to the northeast. That swell has hit California and already passed Hawaii. Then we'll just roll this out in motion. Then right after that, another gale developed on Friday with 34, almost 35-foot seas here south of New Zealand. We actually got a Jason 2 satellite pass directly over the core of it on Friday night. Average seas were 34.1 feet. That's a 15 reading average right there, with a single reading to 39 feet. So the models were right on track. That system pushed east and then faded out. System number 3 then formed on Saturday night. 32-foot seas. Let's see where that goes here. We got a pretty decent pass later Sunday night. 33-foot seas in the core, about 32-foot seas over where the Jason satellite passed. And sure enough, the 15 reading average was 32.9 feet with a single reading to 37 feet. Again, the models were well on track. That system sort of puttered along and then regrouped to create yet another system. This was system number 4 on Wednesday, and here we go. It peaked out right about there. That was about 40-foot seas there. Out in here, 32, 32, 34, let's say 35-foot seas, maybe 36-foot seas right in that area. And sure enough, the 15 reading average was 36.8 with a single reading to 44 feet. But again, 40-foot seas just off the satellite track, aimed a little bit off the pass to California, but not too bad, with a little bit of sideband energy going towards Hawaii. And then the system all kind of faded out. Now we're into Friday and Saturday, and we'll just, and that's as far as we go on this image. Okay, so that sort of gets you set. So the short of it is 4 systems. Swell number 1 hitting California right now. Swell number 2 bound in for California on Monday. Swell number 3 on Tuesday. Swell number 4, little bits right at late on Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, and then fading out Saturday, Sunday. And energy also for Hawaii, and of course down into Central America, South America. And this appears to be just the start of a well-entrenched pattern. So let's look at the forecast. We'll start, as usual, up at jet stream level. Jet stream level winds about 30,000 feet, help support the formation of gales when they do form, help direct their track. We're looking for troughs. That is a dip in the jet stream going towards the equator. That would help create clockwise circulation aloft and down at the surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure in the southern hemisphere. And low pressure, of course, would generate southwest winds in its northwest quadrant, so clockwise like that. You're looking for fetch going this way. That would be pushing up towards California, Hawaii, and towards Central and South America. Anyway, those winds generate seas. Seas generate swell. Swell radiates away from the fetch area and then creates surf when it impacts your coast. So let's take a look at the forecast. Right now, this is on Sunday night. We see another building area of winds here. Now, we have had a ridge here that was sort of shutting things down for a few days, but a new bit of wind energy. A ridge, by the way, pushes to the south and prevents the formation of low pressure. A trough helps create low pressure. So what we're looking for here, we have sort of a zonal flow. That doesn't directly support low pressure, but it doesn't hinder it either. And the further north that zonal flow is, the greater the odds for storm production. And then we have another pocket of winds forecast out on Tuesday, fairly decently strong and starting to lift to the north a little bit. What is this? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's about 170 knots, one little pocket. And again, a bit of a trough here, not super well defined, but enough of a trough embedded in a zonal flow and working its way the whole way across the South Pacific into Saturday. And then you see still a very broad trough, but not so much wind supporting it. And then we'll just keep going here. And then a big ridge starts building in about a week out, and that will likely shut things down for a little bit. Let's go take a look at what's supposed to happen down at the surface. So here we go, surface level pressure, surface level winds. We actually see a fetch of 40-knot winds from the southwest. This is actually a hangover from system a little bit ago. It is more this region over here that we're looking for, and sure enough, come on even tonight, a small, tiny area, 55-knot winds. Now, these are west winds. The Great Circle Paths, and we'll get into it in a minute and show you. The Great Circle Paths basically are for California, and Hawaii is almost straight up and down over here, south of Hawaii, so that'd be 155. It's almost straight up and down. So you have to have south winds, not east winds. But for California, you actually have Great Circle Paths that sort of go like that. So some of this fetch is aimed up towards California, and you've seen how it's 50, 55-knot winds. That has the potential to generate swell. And look at that, it continues at 45 knots even into Tuesday across the South Pacific. And then here comes a far stronger system with 55-knot winds on Wednesday and a broad area 50-knot winds aimed perfectly to the northeast. And that continues and actually is supposed to redevelop and into Thursday, and yet another system behind that with 55-knot winds. These are storms. When you have 50-knot winds or greater, they're storms, they're not gales. And it continues. Whoa, look at that. A little area of 60-knot winds, even hurricane force is 65-knot. So definitely an entrenched pattern. And you see high pressure here, low pressure here creates a gradient. That creates broad area of steady winds, and that's great for generating seas. That continues into Friday, and still 45-knot winds even into Saturday morning, and 40-knot winds almost into Sunday before the ridge sets up, and there you go. There's low pressure, but all the fetch is aimed into Antarctica, and things start falling apart. This looks great both aloft and down at the surface. Now let's go see what effect those winds have on the ocean surface. So here we go, significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, and even as this, see a little area, 30-foot seas, tiny, but that's probably good enough to push a little bit of impulse swell before the real swell machine gets wound up. And here we go into Monday, not super giant, but a small area of 40-foot seas. It says 41-foot seas here, but we'll say 40 feet. And that continues and lifts just slightly north of east into and continuing into Tuesday down to, was that about 36 feet. But now here, notice this, into late Tuesday night and Wednesday, another system with, what is that, about 48-foot seas starts organizing. And the Great Circle Paths for California come right under here. And this is just barely unshadowed in the window, a long ways away, no doubt, and still fetch continues gurgling here in the southeast Pacific even into Wednesday. So this suggests south swell and southwest swell, maybe a little bit too mixed up. And here we go, we're into 46-foot seas into Wednesday, and Thursday more a pretty good solid area here of 43-foot seas pushing off to the northeast, and then a tiny little area of 54-foot seas right behind that, building, right now holding in about the 53-foot range. I mean, this is, if this model is even remotely believable, now we're not talking huge surf, but we're talking certainly just a non-stop barrage of southern hemi swells. Now, the key here is how much of that is going to bleed north. We have to go take a look at the Great Circle Paths to do that. So let's dive in. So here we go, sort of what we've looked at before with great circles overlaid. This is for Southern California. Relative to Northern California, it's pretty close. Now, we can't really get into dissecting the Tahiti swell shadow here because it is different whether you're in Northern California or Southern California. You can see that there. And relative to Hawaii, the key here is the 201-degree angle is the cutoff for Hawaii. Things get shadowed above that by New Zealand, and even when you get past New Zealand, if you're under here between 208 and about 217, swell can get through, but Fiji's sitting right smack in that middle of the window, and that really cuts the swell significantly. So 201 is kind of the cutoff for Hawaii. And we'll do this for Southern California, and you get just a general idea. Now, we're back in time. We're back to Friday. This was the start. The primer swell's already gone. This is swell number 1 that's due in on Monday. You can see right there was at about 212 degrees relative to Southern California. But what we're looking at, if you can find the arrows are almost pointed right up the Great Circle paths here to Southern California. And relative to Northern California, it's the same thing, effectively. And the storm actually pushes up the Great Circle paths. So today's swell, very inconsistent, let's just say it that way, and small, a little bit more size, a little bit more consistency, still a good distance away. Now the storm moves into the Tahiti swell shadow here at some point and becomes less impressive. Then here comes storm number 3. It has pieces that are unshadowed, but it really gets wound up, does most of its thing here behind the swell shadow again, but at least aimed well up the Great Circle paths. And it continued lifting a little bit north there. Watch that little, it's only 30-foot seas or 32-foot seas. And relative to Southern California, that's unshadowed. For Northern California, it was shadowed. And then here comes storm number 4 here. And again, notice the arrows, and we're only talking, maybe 10 or 15 degrees off the Great Circle paths up to California. So that's actually, there we go. There's a good view of it right there. Maybe 20 degrees. Anything less than 30 degrees, and for the most part, you don't get any real reduction in size or consistency. It's really when the storm has the arrows aimed right up the Great Circle paths and it lifts up that direction and the fetch is aimed that direction. That's the optimal situation. So then things pretty much petered out. We had our little lop off here. Here's that little tiny system with 30-foot seas, but it's almost insignificant. Anyway, so now we move into the forecast. Here is Sunday night, moving into Monday. Here's the first system. Now notice this. Look at those arrows. They're almost, not 90 degrees, but probably 60 degrees off the Great Circle path. So though that looks pretty solid at that point, because it's not aimed to the northeast, you're not going to see much size from it. A little bit better there come Tuesday. The energy starts, the winds start turning southwest a little bit more, but not great. Then here comes the stronger system. Now notice here, the Great Circle paths almost run due east to west. Now we're a long ways away. The cutoff from New Zealand is right there, but you're in the swell window for Southern California, and for Northern California, just barely as well. Anyway, we'll go back to Southern California. And this system has better projection up the Great Circle paths. We're looking at Wednesday, Thursday, and still aimed reasonably well to the northeast. Then here comes that other system, supposedly. Again, all the fetches aimed pretty much due east, just crossing, glancing below up the Great Circle paths until you get into, when is this? Friday, a week out, hardly believable. Still, it's probably 30 degrees off the Great Circle paths, but swell nonetheless. And then where are we at here? We're almost at the end of the model. There you go. So the short of it is, these early swells were actually aimed better, though they're weaker. The new forecasted swells, assuming they materialize, are far stronger, but not aimed nearly as well. And then there's the whole swell shadow thing. I mean, really, you got to get either east at Tahiti or you got to go up the east coast of New Zealand, and we're not seeing that on any of these. But so what that really means is very much a lot of surf, but not necessarily large. So use your local knowledge to find the best spots and pick your days and wind conditions and all that sort of stuff. But certainly a lot of swell is likely. Next, let's take a look long term. And not only are we going to try to examine what's causing the bout of storms in the South Pacific right now, but also what the future looks like. So here we go. We're looking at the Kelvin wave generation area. This is the equator, East Pacific here, West Pacific here. We're looking for west winds. Clearly none of that's going on. That would suggest the active phase of the MJO or El Nino, neither of which is happening. Trades are in control, but here's anomalies. And notice this. There are weak west anomalies over the whole area. Some of this right in here is probably attributable to the fading remnants of El Nino. This is a little bit interesting, maybe suggesting the active phase of the MJO, or a hint of it at least. Something is triggering the jet stream and the South Pacific to kind of wake up. We suspect it is at least a very weak active MJO signal. And here we go. The past couple of days, we're looking for, here's the equator. The Kelvin wave generation area is roughly right in here. We see westerly anomalies for, I'm just sort of glancing here. Some sort of weak westerly anomalies for the past, 5 days? And then here's the chart. The Kelvin wave generation area is roughly between these two bars going down. Here's time, May 13th. And about the beginning of June, the oranges and yellows suggest westerly anomalies, very weak ones. And also notice strong westerly anomalies here at, this is 120, this is south of California. Again, this is what we think is the hangover from El Nino. But there's some sort of westerly anomalies that have been going on from there. Here's the current date, and forecast to continue just roughly for maybe another 3 or 4 days, and maybe that is some weak sign of the active phase of the MJO, or at least a neutral phase, where notice before we were just crushed by these easterly anomalies, which suggest the inactive phase of the MJO. Now here's where things get a little weird. This model, the statistic model, suggests the oranges and yellows, this is outgoing long-wave radiation rainfall, basically, suggests the inactive phase. This is negative anomaly, or positive anomalies suggesting more sunlight reflectivity. This clearly shows the pure active phase of the MJOs in the Indian Ocean, and probably has been, and is only going to intensify. This is likely helping to stir up the Indian Ocean significantly, and there's been much surf there. But this inactive phase, as you can see, is in control and forecast to continue for 2 weeks. The dynamic model basically suggests the same thing, minor deviations. But the point being, there is some disagreement amongst the models. The previous model you saw suggested that westerly anomalies are in play. Now, maybe that's not attributable to the MJO, but westerly anomalies, nonetheless, in this area here, help to support the jet stream and help to create storms. So we're thinking that might be playing a part in what's going on in the southern hemi. Then yet, here's another way to look at it. These are the phase diagrams. So basically, this circle represents, let's say it's the North Pole. You're looking down on the North Pole, actually, and you're looking right here, this big heavy dot. That's where the active phase of the MJO is per both these models. It says it's in the Indian Ocean. We saw that in the other models too. And it's forecast to track to the maritime continent. So say, over Indonesia, central Indonesia, and then collapse 2 weeks out. This one, even this model, the GEFS, shows an even weaker sort of pattern. So that doesn't support the thesis that we just talked about. But then you come to this model, the CFS model, and here we go. So this is past history here, February, going to current here. Kelvin wave generation area roughly between right up in this, so right in this area. Okay, and look at this. The yellows and oranges are westerly anomalies, and since the end of May, this model suggests weak westerly anomalies, and that they're supposed to continue for into June 17th, and maybe even as late as the end of June. Now here we'll overlay the MJO, and look at this. The solid red is the active phase of the MJO. So this is diametrically opposed to what the GEFS is saying and one of the other models. So there is, clearly it's a very weak pattern nonetheless, but our guess is something is happening in this area. We'll even overlay equatorial Rossby wave, and you got a little bit of that going on here too, an active or supportive Rossby wave, and maybe the integration of the two is helping to fuel the jet just enough that's helping to push what's going on in the southern hemisphere and generate some surf. Now, the correlation between the MJO and the southern hemisphere is not nearly as strong as the MJO in the northern hemisphere, specifically in the Gulf of Alaska in winter months, but still, there is a little bit of a correlation. So we think this is what's driving it. The point being that after we get past later in June, those westerly anomalies disappear. And so the thought being this, we're on a run of swell. better get it while it's here. If it's MJO related at all or Rossby wave related at all, get it now because the forecast doesn't look nearly as strong. Weak inactive, just basically a dead neutral pattern. And then supposedly this active MJO pattern here in August, but there's no westerly anomalies associated with it. At the end of the day, it's westerly anomalies that drive everything. So this is what we're kind of hanging our hat on for the moment and suggesting this is what's causing the enhanced storm track in the southern hemisphere. We'll probably eat our words, though, if it continues pumping into July. Next up, subsurface ocean temperatures. West Pacific here, East Pacific here. This is the surface. You go down 100 meters, 200 meters, so that'd be about 600 feet roughly. Clearly, El Nino's gone. You'd want to see a lot more warm water over here. It's all starting to pool and build in the West Pacific. The 28-degree isotherm right here has been locked steady at about 58 to 59 west, and cooler temperatures abound east of there. Now, here's the actual anomalies, differences from normal. If we were in an El Nino pattern, you'd see warm water all here. Instead, what we see is cool water, and lots of it, like a river of cool water flowing under the equator. Now, this is interesting. It's erupting out here, not off Ecuador. If anything, temperatures have built just a little around Ecuador. The thought is, and this is weird, so our El Nino was westward displaced, right? Okay, most of the activity was over Hawaii, away from the U.S. West Coast. That's why we didn't get as much rain as everyone thought, because it turned into be a westward displaced El Nino. Now, La Nina, clearly this is La Nina, but the main eruption site for La Nina is out, let's go get the actual from here. Whoops, here we go. Do it this way. From, let's say, 150 to about 120 west, or from Hawaii to a little bit off the California coast on the equator, okay? If it was a really strong La Nina, and this is the thought here, if it was a really strong La Nina, it'd be wiping out these warm temperatures, and you'd see cool water here, and it tried to do that, but lately, it's only getting warmer here, not significantly warm, just like normal, but all the cool water's here. This maybe is a sign that our La Nina is not going to be a very strong one. And if that's the case, that also builds into the thesis that maybe the Pacific Decadal Oscillation is shifting towards the positive phase, and this rebound from El Nino is not going to be as bad as it could be, and maybe rather short-lived, and then we return to a neutral pattern a year and a half, 2 years out, something like that. The high-res imagery also suggests exactly the same thing. Here's the eruption site, 150, right there on the surface to there. And for whatever reason, there's cool water at depth, but normal or even a little pocket of warm water, or maybe this is just an aberration and eventually all the cool water is going to work its way in here. We could be completely blowing smoke here. It's way too early to know, but for the moment, it looks somewhat promising. Still looking at the upper 200 meters of the ocean temperature. Here we were back in July last year, Kelvin wave, another Kelvin wave, another Kelvin wave, the final Kelvin wave in February. And then here was the onslaught of La Nina. But again, notice the coolest temperatures don't really get past about 120 west, and they don't even venture in. This is 0 to half a degree anomalies here below normal. So we'll see. We'll see whether this creeps east or not, but right now this is not a horrible situation. Now this is interesting here also. This is sea surface temperatures, not subsurface, surface temperatures. Now clearly we see cool water right here along the coast of Peru, coming off of Ecuador, and then heading to the west along the equator. All here at the Galapagos are here, and then out into the Pacific to a point about south of Hawaii. Hawaii is right there. There you can see it. Okay, cooler than normal waters. But the interesting part, and this is kind of a pulse, La Nina is not, it breeds, and right now it's kind of weakening a little bit. The warm water, notice these pockets of very warm water. This is all hangover warm water from El Nino, still in the area and still there, and this cool pocket is actually retracted a little bit. We don't think that is going to last very long, but for the moment it looks pretty good. Now here's the trend for the past 7 days. You can see here's those The reds are warming trends, and you can see warming, little pockets of cooling, but not a whole lot. The interesting part about this is you go over off of Africa, and you can see cooling here. And what we've noticed over the years is that first what you'll get is, so this is like a mirror image La Nina going on off of Africa, just like what's happening here. And the trend is cooling water here. And what we see is it'll first pulse under Africa, and then a couple of weeks later, it'll start showing up off of Peru and off the Galapagos. And right now we're in a we'll call it a warming trend. It's not really a warming trend, but just a weakening trend. It's breathing down, but we suspect that because of this, you're going to see things cooling off again off of Ecuador at some point in time. And then here we go. Here's actual water, sea surface temperature anomalies again. Now notice it's not significantly cooler off here, just a little bit, okay? And if you recall from last week, the expanse of the cooler waters here off the Galapagos were larger. They're getting chopped off. They're getting shunted by whatever's going on. Again, this sort of leads us to believe maybe the active phase of the MJO, or just whatever it is, the lack of an inactive phase is allowing La Nina to sort of get stomped on a little bit. We suspect it will come back, but that's the thought for right now. Also notice much cooler water up here. That's classic PDO, warm water off the U.S. West Coast. By this time of year, if we were in a real La Nina right now, water should be much cooler here. Trades, or north winds, which are trades in California, high pressure, just driving a steady north wind and then sweeping it out over here. None of that's in play right now. But again, this is all hangover from El Nino. But still, if a strong La Nina were coming, you'd already see signals of it in the atmosphere, and we're not seeing that as of right now. Next up, teleconnections. How well is the coolness or warmness in the ocean affecting the atmosphere above it? The Southern Oscillation Index, looks at differences in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Negative numbers suggest the active phase of the MJO, and we don't see any signs of that. It looks pretty neutral. If anything, we have a little spike here of positive numbers, but we had a little spike of negative numbers there, so it's basically all noise. The 30-day average, so here we go. We were at minus 12 a month ago. Now we're at basically dead neutral, 0.23. So this suggests that certainly not the active phase is in play, and El Nino is fading out. The 90-day running average, which was minus 14 a month ago, is now minus 6.51. El Nino slowly fading away. In fact, we go back to this chart. This is what we forgot to show you. The low-pass filter shows you El Nino. And right here, this is back in February. Strong number of contours here, was at 4 contours, low-pass filter. And this suggests that El Nino is all but gone by the end of August. It will be gone officially per this chart. So that just ties in a little bit to what we were talking about earlier. And if anything, here is La Nina, the dotted lines in the Kelvin wave generation area taking over. Right now, nothing too much going on, not expected to see that till July. So in terms of coupling with the atmosphere, that's what we're getting at, is El Nino is still more dominant than La Nina, even though La Nina is clearly getting a foothold in the ocean. Yet another index, the ESPI, basically like the Southern Oscillation Index, only it measures actual rainfall north of Darwin versus in the Nino areas right here, in the, let's say, south of Hawaii, north of Tahiti area. The current number, minus 0.26, which suggests, so 0 is neutral. Positive numbers are El Nino. Negative numbers are La Nina. So we're barely in La Nina range right now. And you can look up here and you can see deviations from normal, a little bit drier than normal. The blues is what you want to see more of. And then finally, a quick look at the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. We got the numbers for May, 2.35. Positive numbers suggest the active phase of the PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation, and that's actually been in play. You can see it right here. It started in January 2014. We're 2 years into it, and very strong here in 2016 as well, almost stronger. We had a 2.5, a 2.45, 2.3. And so we're in that range still. One could say this is all attributable to El Nino. It's when we get down into here when La Nina really starts getting its grips in the wintertime, and we see what the numbers are. If they're hovering around 0 or just barely negative, that will be a good sign. Again, it's going to be probably another year and a half to really know whether the PDO is shifted. And again, PDO is anywhere from a 15 to a 30-year trend where the tendency is either favorable for La Nina or El Nino. The point being, look at all these. Since 98, we were in a big positive run up to 98, and then boom, it started going negative, and it's been 0 or negative generally since 98, the last big El Nino, up to January 2014. That's about a 15-year run there. The thought is maybe the PDO has shifted. What this could mean is we got 15 to 30 years ahead of us of good surf and more storm production and more rain, but way too early to make that bold assumption. Okay, finally, the CDAS Nino 3.4 index. This basically measures, it's a rough approximation of the temperatures in the main Nino regions between about 170 and 120 west on the equator, 5 degrees north and south. Of course, back in March, we were still well under the grips of El Nino. We're up about 1.75 degrees above normal. Now here is the slow demise of El Nino, and it kind of actually went towards La Nina here at about a -4 or 4.3, minus 0.4 or 0.43. But here we go. Notice, remember we were talking about how La Nina pulses and is weaker at the moment, and clearly this is suggesting that we expect the trend to continue to turn around at some point here, maybe in the next week, and start dropping off negative again. But for now, gives us a little bit of hope, but we're only a 0.331 above normal, which is pretty much nothing. Oh, we were talking the Southern Oscillation Index, by the way. So negative numbers represent El Nino. Again, back January 2014, just like the PDO, everything changed. The trend started heading negative. It started going negative, suggesting El Nino. Clearly, we were in El Nino. Here's October of last year. And then you can see the pulses of the MJO, but notice the trend now is upward. Here is the inactive phase of the MJO. There's this little downward spike here. That suggests perhaps the active phase of the MJO, but still nothing significant. And we expect as La Nina gets a little bit better grips, these numbers will continue up. We would hope that they average out somewhere around 0 and don't go too high in the positive range come December, January or so. And finally, the sea surface temperature forecast, Nino 3.4 region. Where are we right now? We're in somewhere in June right here. This projects we're just slightly negative, and we're actually doing a little bit better than that. The forecast per this model suggests continued dipping into negative territory down to -1 degrees, and then just hanging about there. So -1 in, what is that? Let's say September or so, and just hanging there. And then in January, starting to retreat, moving back towards neutral. So this is our La Nina, a 1 degree La Nina, which isn't very strong. We'll see what really happens. Other models, consensus of a bunch of models, all models for that matter, say about 0.08 or 0.7. So the consensus is actually a little bit better than what the CFSV2 model suggests. So either way, La Nina's coming. You can't deny it. The question is, will it be moderated by the PDO? And is the PDO actually starting to influence the atmosphere and moving more favorable for us for the next 15 years? So, to wrap it up, swell. Lots of swell. Maybe not huge, but certainly enough that your arms will be falling off by the end of we got a whole week coming. And then it looks like maybe another week beyond that, not optimally aimed, a lot of it shadowed, a lot of it, sort of a mix, but they'll be swell nonetheless. Make the most of it. Beyond that, the models suggest, if this is being driven by the MJO, that maybe things will settle down here come July. Make the most of it while you can. Long range, of course, our whole La Nina thing. It will be setting up. It's coming. Hopefully it will be moderated. So for now, Get yourself some surf. Make the most of it. We'll do this again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.